Well, no matter how you look at it, the 007 franchise is at the end of an era. The James Bond we came to know and love is dead. And while you get months and months of news feeds about rumors of the new Bond casting, new director, spin-off series of Amazon, I think now is as good a time as any to count down the top 25 best James Bond films. Now, I will throw out some disclaimers. There are some films that do technically count as James Bond films, and so real quick, these three out of the way. Casino Royale from 1967. This is the type of crazy that they just don't make anymore, and for good reason. With 6 different directors and 11 different writers and heck 5 different people claiming to be James Bond, this movie is a mess. It is very much one where they weren't finished filming it, but hey, they hit the required runtime, might as well release it. Next, a movie made completely out of spite, Never Say Never Again. Sean Connery back in the role of Bond in 1983. Such an odd part of Bond history, where the rights to one Bond book were owned by Kevin McClory, and he was making his own version of Thunderball, where at the same year, the Broccoli family was continuing on with Roger Moore as James Bond. This movie makes some strange choices, including one of the best examples of producers not really understanding how video games work. An interesting part of Bond history, but not a good movie to watch. And our final novelty James Bond is 1957's Casino Royale, which, for any compliment, has to be followed with the, for what it is. It is good, for what it is. I do think that Peter Lorre will have made an excellent Bond villain in an actual Bond film, which is a shame that he was only cast for this TV special, which is good for what it is. Now with those 3 films out of the way, let's go on to the actual list.
25. No Time to Die. Even though this movie is at the very bottom of my official list, I'm still going to try to be kind. After all, there are some good things in this movie. At 2 hours 45 minutes, it better have something good in it. And I'm aware that this movie went through a lot of production problems. It got delayed and delayed again. I remember following this movie back when it was going to be called Shatterhand. Likely the Bond movie with the most production problems of any of the Bond films, and it shows in the final product. It feels like anytime they had a delay or anytime they had some rewrites to work, their solution was just adding another scene to the film. It feels like one of those road trip games where you make up the story one sentence at a time. Sometimes it feels like a gritty Daniel Craig film, and other times it feels like a Roger Moore film. A movie where Bond goes to an evil lair called Poison Island, and he's trying to stop an evil scientist from launching these nukes. Let's talk about the villain here, Freddie Mercury. One of the worst Bond villains there are. It is a shame to say that he is also one of the most accomplished villains. His motivation goes from wanting to stop Spectre to wanting to sell chemical missiles to the highest bidder. The scenes with Felix Leiter, the scenes with some of the new characters are really fun and exciting and some very well done action sequences. The scenes that Bond has with Swan and has with Blofeld, they are far less interesting. It's like the writers had a lot of cool ideas for things they wanted to see in a Bond movie, but they didn't know how to put it together. So they just Frankensteined this movie together, and the end result is sloppy, and it all falls apart, particularly with the ending. And now the Bond franchise doesn't know where to go or what to do with itself. No Time to Die falls at the very bottom of the list. 24. Diamonds Are Forever. Going from the end of the Daniel Craig era to the end of the Sean Connery era, it was clear for both of these actors that they were very much done with the role by their final film. Diamonds Are Forever is by far the campiest James Bond film there is. The plot involves Ernst Blofeld gathering a bunch of diamonds to make a giant space laser. Despite this being the silliest Bond film, I believe it's the one with the highest body count. Not from James Bond, but no, Blofeld actually killing a whole bunch of people in this. Now, if it drives you crazy when the villains have every chance to kill James Bond, but for whatever reason decide not to, oh, this film will drive you nuts. Blofeld has the gun pointed at Bond, has Bond go into an elevator. Elevator shoots out knockout gas, Bond falls asleep, his henchmen arrive, put him in the trunk of the car, take him to a construction site and put him in a pipe there, and just assume that the construction workers won't bother to check if there's a guy in the pipe, will install it, and then a robot will come and kill him. Seems like an elaborate way.
Why don't you just shoot him?
Later in the movie, when when Bond arrives at the evil base, Blofeld just takes him on a tour of the place and then locks him in a janitor's closet and is like, okay, why are you keeping him alive? What are you doing? Go from the absolute chilling ending of On Her Majesty's Secret Service. I'm wanting to see James Bond get his revenge, only to be greeted by a film where Bond's in Vegas and fights off two women called Bambi and Thumper, and actually is losing to the fight. A scene where an elephant pulls the slot machine and is excited that it won. A scene where somebody turns into a gorilla.
Stop that. That's racist.
It's such a whiplash of tones, it'd be like following Batman Begins with Batman and Robin. This is a weird movie. 23. Quantum of Solace. For those who think that I hate Bond when he's just being campy and silly, I'm also capable of hating Bond when he's being overly dark and serious. Similar to No Time to Die, this one likewise went through a lot of production problems. This one was being written on the fly during the writer's strike, enough so that Daniel Craig had to be writing scenes as he went along, and I was hesitant to call Rami Malek the worst Bond villain because of the villain in this one, Dominic Green, making a deliberate effort to go away from the over-the-top villains that have something memorable about them. The director made the bold choice to make a villain in which nothing was memorable about him, and it leads to a very underwhelming final fight where Bond has to take out this accountant as the main villain. This was a Bond film that was clearly trying to capitalize off of the Jason Bourne popularity, and it shows in both its grounded realism but also in its absolutely awful camera work. The cinematography for this, both in the action scenes and even just the dialogue scenes, it is shot in such a way that is visually confusing, disorienting, and just gives you a headache trying to follow it. And suffering through the headache to try to follow the story just leads to an underwhelming finale. Oh, and just as a side note, it also has the worst Bond theme song of all time. 22. Spectre. Daniel Craig, what are you doing here again? They introduced Christoph Waltz, who is good casting. I know he can play a good villain, but he just is not given enough to work with here.
It wasn't the actor's fault, it was a script.
This film makes the mistake of trying to retroactively put together the continuity of the Daniel Craig Bond films, acting as if, oh, you know Le Chiffre? You know Quantum? You know that bad guy that was just after M for Revenge? This was all part of an elaborate scheme spearheaded by one guy and his super shadowy organization, which is really bad at keeping its secrets. We have Bond and Swan, who have absolutely no romantic chemistry. We have Dave Bautista as the henchman, who I know could be an interesting character. And the movie keeps cutting back to this subplot of M and the paperwork and, oh, will the United Nations agree on this deal? And every time they cut to it, I feel like I'm doing homework. They feel like scenes that you have to watch in order for the third act to make sense and them have a even bigger battle. And they set up this idea that, oh, okay, I'm torturing you when I make this drill in your head and you won't be able to recognize Swan anymore, the love of your life. And then he does it and then it's just fine. So it's like, did you lie to me? Was Bond's love for Swan just so strong that it beat whatever that weird drill was? The story was all over the place, and at this point it was clear that Daniel Craig would rather be literally anywhere else than being in James Bond. 21. You Only Live Twice. And speaking of a Bond movie that's all over the place story-wise, we have one that is partially written by the guy who wrote Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. It includes a subplot of how James Bond has to train to become a ninja, which is really cool on paper, until you realize that in order to officially become a ninja, he's gonna have to disguise himself as a Japanese man in a costume that is both parts super offensive and also super ineffective at disguising him.
That's racist.
He also has to get married to this lady, who's quickly killed off and then replaced with a different lady. The subplot of him faking his own death doesn't go anywhere and really only serves to have a cool title for the film. This is another one where the bad guys have every opportunity to kill Bond, but instead just kind of walk him around. And the idea that Bond follows Blofeld around his evil lair and doesn't do anything to try to disarm him or attack Blofeld. This is a Blofeld that Bond could easily take. He doesn't even have the gun pointed at him half the time, but Bond just walks along willing to be shot if it weren't for the fact that he was saved by one of his ninja friends.
When you have to shoot, shoot, don't talk.
Now this one does have a cool fight scene between James Bond and the Rock's grandpa, and it has a really great final act. Sure, a lot of it doesn't make sense. What was James Bond's endgame for dressing up like an astronaut and getting onto the space shuttle? What was he planning on doing from there? But the evil villain's lair inside of a fake volcano and a bunch of ninja come in to fight them, that is a super cool finale. Also, kudos to Donald Pleasance for staying in character while the cat is absolutely freaking out from all the explosions. 20. Live and Let Die. Now this is probably my hottest take of all the James Bond things I'm throwing out there. A lot of people I've spoken to have put this as one of their top 3 James Bond films or favorite Bond film of all time, or at the very least the best Roger Moore Bond film. But for me, it is Roger Moore's worst. This one has very conflicting tones. This is probably the closest we have to a James Bond horror film, but at the same time, it's the film that introduces us to Sergeant J.W. Pepper. Now, I'm not trying to criticize Pepper, but I am trying to show it's a very tonally all-over-the-place film. And Roger Moore had yet to find his style as James Bond. Feels like James Bond in this one just makes problems worse for himself. The bad guy in this believes in voodoo magic, and he has this fortune teller. And they're like, well, okay, Bond, whatever you do, don't sleep with that fortune teller. And he's like, but I'm James Bond. And he does. And it feels like the rest of the conflict is caused because Bond does that. There's also this part where one bad guy takes off a mask to reveal he's another bad guy.
What a twist!
And it's like, what difference does that make? Why? This is a movie with a lot of great henchmen. I liked Whisper, the guy with the claw. I liked Baron Samedi, a henchman that is probably more iconic than the main villain himself. I liked the action scenes on the boat. I liked the stunt with the crocodiles. And I liked the Paul McCartney song. And the villain death, in keeping with the spirit of the film, is both parts terrifying, but also hard to take serious. 19. Die Another Day. Alright, Bond. Quit trying to make diamonds into a giant space laser a thing. It's not going to happen.
And that's your solution to everything. It's not gonna happen.
Not with that attitude.
This is Bond at his most over the top. You got race cars, lasers, airplanes, and a lot of the CGI doesn't hold up today, and it didn't hold up back then. This was meant to be a celebration of Bond's 40th anniversary. As such, it had a lot of moments of fan service to pay homage to previous films in the franchise. Why are you dressed like that?
Is this some kind of kinky thing?
Okay, I'm not complaining. This was the movie that put Bond just a little too far out of the realm of reality. The invisible cars, the rocket car trying to outrace a laser, only to have Bond windsurf a tidal wave to get away, was just a step too far for everyone. And that's if you can get past the part where they're riding on hovercrafts past all the landmines, or have Bond use memories of being tortured in order to force a fake cardiac arrest to make his escape, or a giant ice fortress that's being melted. James Bond is about escapism, but this is one film that just took things a step too far. 18. Moonraker. Now, when I just called Die Another Day the most over-the-top James Bond, a lot of people may have been thinking of Moonraker. And yes, I'll admit the evil villain scheme in this one is the most ambitious and out there of any of them. Hugo Drax wants to start a space colony of beautiful people and poison the entire Earth, killing all the people in it, and then he will come down with his beautiful space people and repopulate it as a paradise. Something I noticed in this film while going through my Bondathon is that Hugo Drax's scheme is the exact same as Stromberg's in the previous film, right down to sharing the same henchmen from the previous film. Just replace water with space.
Eerily similar.
Exactly the same.
A virtual carbon copy.
If you can get past the wacky premise, there is a lot of fun to be had in this film, with a variety of action set pieces. This one's a ton of fun. 17. A View to a Kill. Now this one is the lowest ranked on Rotten Tomatoes and is frequently seen as the bottom tier Bond film. Roger Moore was too old for the role. It's obvious when stunt doubles are being used. This film sets itself up more as a modern day Goldfinger. Instead of Fort Knox, we have Silicon Valley. We once again have a boardroom where he announces his evil plan. One person backs out only to be killed. We have the bad guy's main henchman be a woman who Bond seduces and at some point turns good. What can I say? I just like Christopher Walken as the villain.
You amuse me, Mr. Bond.
Dolph Lundgren makes a cameo. James Bond has his least clever cover name.
Stock. James Stock.
There's a scene after James Bond escapes a fire with the help of Stacey Sutton.
James!
That he's then questioned by the police, and he says, oh, I'm a secret agent. And then when the police don't immediately believe him, there's a big, long car chase where James Bond uses a fire truck to escape. And I'm just thinking, what was the point of that? Why not just show him ID, or there had to be a better way to communicate that than having a big chase scene with a fire truck. 16. Thunderball, the movie at the center of Kevin McClory's legal battle with Bond. The movie begins with Bond going to the sauna to relax, where he sees somebody from Spectre. Free tip for you guys, if you're ever starting a secret evil organization, don't make rings that advertise the fact that you're part of a secret organization. What ensues is a series of pranks that they do to each other. One of the major things that's holding this movie back is the fact that underwater battles are not nearly as exciting as the movie thinks it is. Much like an underwater level in any video game, it really slows down the action and makes everything just feel a lot more of a slog to get through. I think it's funny that random NPC ends up being the guy who saves the day in this. Just shows up and the lady's like, I don't know who he is, but he's here to save the day.
Who's he?
I don't know, but he helped me.
He may have saved the day, but Bond didn't save any room for him in the lifeboat. What helps this movie is some classic Blofeld and Spectre shenanigans. The capturing of 2 nuclear weapons and arranging for Big Ben to chime this many times. M gathers all the 00 agents. The stakes feel much bigger this time around. And with the reveal of the second-in-command in Spectre, in Largo, you get the idea that Bond is working his way up the ranks, and soon enough he's going to be going up against the final boss. Sean Connery's charm as James Bond carries a lot of the film. He is rocking that pink shirt.
Why is that man in pink?
15. Octopussy. Now, I've sat through each of these Bond films at least 3 times, and Octopussy is the one that I still have the hardest time following the story for. I don't get what the Fabergé egg is about, the double crosses between, okay, how is Octopussy involved in this? Is she one of the bad guys? Now, Kamala Khan is here, he's the main bad guy. Okay, what does this Russian general get out of this? Something to do with a bomb? Okay, so they're blowing up. What did the diamonds have to do with it? The 00 agent was killed dressed like a clown. Why is he trying to stop this train? Why did they kill this general? I thought they were on the same team as the general. What does this opening set piece have to do with the rest of the movie? I don't know, but my mind naturally boils things down to the simplest things. Bond is the good guy, the people he's fighting are the bad guys, and we get ourselves some entertaining action sequences to follow. It very much becomes a vibes one. This one unfairly gets a bad rep, mainly because Bond is literally dressed like a clown in this. And it didn't help the reputation that Roger Moore turned the Bond franchise to be too silly. What better representation we have than to have James Bond literally being a clown? But no, I think that this one is still a ton of fun, with a lot of great action set pieces. One part that always stood out to me, Bond is rushing to try to stop a bomb from exploding. And these high schoolers stop and they're telling him, oh, get in the car, get in the car. And then they drive off. I have nothing to say. It's just a funny moment.
Octopussy. Man, I must have seen that movie twice.
14. The Man with the Golden Gun. Now, I might have this one higher than most people. This was the lowest performing James Bond movie at the box office of all time. I understand why this can be seen as a lesser Bond film. There's a lot of story beats that really don't make sense. We once again have a villain that has a chance to kill Bond, and instead decides that, oh, I'm going to send him to a karate school. That'll get him. There's these guys that get into a fight with Bond. Do they work for Scaramanga or Spectre? No, it's just a misunderstanding and they're guys who want to fight. The whole conflict between Bond and Scaramanga is very contrived. Bond is sent a golden bullet with a 007 saying, oh, Scaramanga's after you. But that is sent by Scaramanga's girlfriend. The only reason Bond goes after him at the end is because Goodnight gets captured. And this is the Bond movie where Bond kills the fewest number of people. The only person he kills in this film is the titular Man with the Golden Gun. But for a lot of these Bond adventures, the hero is only as good as his villain, and Christopher Lee as Scaramanga might be James Bond's best villain. Now, I'm already a huge fan of Christopher Lee. He's a man with nearly 300 acting credits, 200 of those he's playing a villain, a horror movie icon for sure, but even outside of that, just his role as Francisco Scaramanga absolutely steals the show. But the problem is, Scaramanga was too likable. The fact that he has to lose, and the way he loses, is a bit of a letdown.
Remarkable, really remarkable. Well, I don't think there's very much more that we can say about that particular atrocity.
13. Dr. No. The other villain role that was offered to Christopher Lee, but I think he made the right call. Dr. No is a good beginning chapter for Bond. You get to see the ins and outs of the life of a spy. Introducing all these tropes does lead to this one feeling the most vanilla of all the group. There is some sloppy rear projection, jump cuts, and dubbing that make the movie feel its age. But in general, I feel the pacing and suspense in this is well done, with the exception being when they get to the island. They do the song scene where they have to decontaminate Bond and Honey for being on Crab Key, and not only do they do it once, they do it twice. That could have been cut. and nothing would have been missed. There's a scene where they try to poison Bond with a tarantula, and then he smashes it with a shoe, and it's funny to hear the orchestra swell each time Bond smacks the spider with his shoe. Comes across more silly than it does suspenseful. We have some really cool Bond moments in this film, and the final act is classic James Bond stuff. We have him knocking out a guard, putting on his disguise, and turning on the self-destruct sequence.
Look out! The lever! Get away from that lever! You'll blow us all to atoms!
I think every movie could benefit from having some sort of self-destruct sequence go on. The movie does a good job building up the sense of dread of who Dr. No is. He doesn't appear until very late into the film, and Joseph Wiseman does a good job in the role. He introduces Bond to the idea of Spectre. Dr. No is definitely a plain Jane vanilla James Bond film, but it introduced the character well and set good groundwork for the franchise to follow. 12. The world is not enough. The Bond family motto. The Pierce Brosnan era made the mistake of having two films involving a climax on a boat or submarine right next to each other, so the two end up blending together in people's minds. This film involves a lot more of the Bond family. The enemy holds a personal grudge against M, and MI6 itself is attacked. We have a unique Bond-villain relationship, with Renard as the more physical threat to Bond. We have the return of Robbie Coltrane, and he plays a great, uneasy ally to James Bond. We get to see a more vulnerable side of Bond, both physically in that he's working his way through it on a broken arm, and emotionally because he gets himself emotionally invested in the case. And we have one of Bond's all-time coldest kills, and is followed up by Bond's best quip.
I never miss.
In general, Bond has a lot of great lines in this one, including a few thanks to our good friend Christmas Jones. Which, come on people, I can totally buy her as a nuclear physicist.
I played a nuclear psychiatrist in a James Bond movie.
11. The Spy Who Loved Me. This one starts off with a bang, with one of Bond's all-time great pre-credit sequences and James Bond's best and most iconic stunt of all time. Bond is teamed up with one of the all-time great Bond girls, Agent Triple X, and Bond is going up against one of the all-time great henchmen in Jaws. There's an exciting action sequence on a great set made by Ken Adams. I love the fact that Bond tells them, hey, I'm going to go in, and they're like, okay, we're going to give you 5 minutes, no more, no less. And after 5 minutes, they're like, okay, blow it up with them still inside. Like I said, every movie needs a good self-destruct sequence.
The ship will automatically destruct in T-5 minutes.
I like the fact that when Bond's undercover and he's asked questions about fish from the all-time fish expert, Stromberg, at first you're wondering, oh, does Bond not know? And he's James Bond. He's the ultimate know-it-all. Of course he knows about fish. And I like the part where she's asking, Bond, did you kill my husband, Ringo Starr? And Bond's like, I don't know, I killed a lot of people. I don't really check, but probably. And so it leads to this great alliance of convenience where she's like, oh, I'm so angry at you. Once we take down Stromberg, I'm going to kill you. We have a great Bond girl, we have a great henchman, and we have a great action sequence. We just don't have a really good villain. And Stromberg was originally written to be Ernst Blofeld, but because of the previously mentioned Kevin McClory Thunderball situation, they didn't have the rights to the character. So instead, they just gave us this guy who really likes fish.
I thought he disappeared after that scandal at the aquarium.
10. Goldfinger. Seen by many to be the absolute gold standard in James Bond films, Goldfinger has a great henchman, has a great Bond girl in Pussy Galore, has a great villain in Goldfinger, and it has a simple, straightforward evil scheme. Unlike that Octopussy movie, Goldfinger wants to irradiate all the gold in Fort Knox, thus making his gold more valuable. Simple, straightforward, no nonsense. It has some iconic scenes that are forever ingrained with the DNA of the James Bond franchise.
Do you expect me to talk?
I don't expect anything from you except to die and be a very cheap funeral.
So why isn't it higher up on my list? Well, really, James Bond doesn't do very much in it. Once he gets captured by Goldfinger, kind of twiddles his thumbs, buys his time, forces himself on Pussy Galore, and that kissing was good enough to make her find the light and see the good, and she ends up saving the day. Well, I mean, two of the big scenes are playing golf and playing gin rummy, and the way he wins at golf is the most ticky-tack call, but I want to play with a guy that's like, oh, I'm sorry, you used the wrong golf ball here. Ah, come on, Bond. We still did a great action sequence in Fort Knox, including a great fight with Oddjob, just demonstrating what a great henchman he is, that Oddjob knows he's going to be killed, but does not care. And he was a foe that Bond wasn't able to out-strength, but he had to outsmart. And I find it amusing that Bond wasn't able to disarm the bomb.
How tough can it be to disarm a bomb? Just gotta pull a few wires here and
Overall, great Bond henchman, great Bond villain, great evil scheme, but let's try to give James Bond something to do in the film.
Goldfinger. He's the man with the Midas touch. He's the man with the Midas touch.
9. Tomorrow Never Dies. Going from the most iconic James Bond to the most overlooked James Bond. Coming out around the same time as Titanic, and not having a great N64 game to go along with it, Tomorrow Never Dies is too often forgotten as a great James Bond film. Yes, it is convenient that when the bad guys have an opportunity to kill Bond, he's saved because the assassin receives a phone call. The henchmen were unable to open Bond's car. How hard can it be to open James Bond's car? This one has great pacing for a Bond film and terrific variety of action set pieces. We go from jet planes to submarines to motorcycles, helicopters, fist fight, gunfight, a car chase where Bond uses a remote control car, scenes where Bond has to sneak in, and scenes where Bond has to punch his way out. Along on the adventure, matching Bond's skills, we have Wei Lin, played by Michelle Yeoh. Of all the Bond girls, Wei Lin is the most deserving of her own spin-off series.
With the hottest action heroine, Michelle Yeoh.
Speaking of underappreciated stars in this film, we also have Gerard Butler in this, and Terry Hatcher. We have Elliot Carver playing a deliciously over-the-top Bond villain, and with him not being a match to Bond or Wei Lin physically, he has himself Stamper as his henchman. This is a criminally overlooked Bond film. It is a great time from start to finish. If you haven't seen this one, definitely give it a watch. 8. For Your Eyes Only. Now, I'm in a bit of a minority here where this is my favorite Roger Moore film. This was a deliberate attempt by the studio to take Bond in a bit more of a serious direction going into the 80s.
Give us a kiss. Give us a kiss.
Well, really, Mr. Bond.
But Roger is able to sell a serious scene more than people give him credit for. In this one, it feels like Bond is caught in the crossfire in a story that is much bigger than he originally thought. You have a great twist with the villain, which really shook up the story in interesting ways. There's a lot of good stealth and sneaking around in this one. Instead of Bond having his car chased with a bunch of gadgets, that one quickly is... Okay, so maybe it is difficult to get into Bond's car. That phone call is vindicated, but this makes Bond have to do a car chase where he doesn't rely on his gadgets to get out of it, but has to rely on superior driving and intellect. Wait a second. Is that Lupin's car? Yeah, it's totally Lupin III's car. Well, this movie just got some bonus points from me, that's for sure. From the pre-title sequence, I could tell that this was going to be a James Bond movie that I liked. It resolved plot points that had been dangling for years because of Kevin McClory legal battles. Not the ideal way to wrap up the story, still a cathartic experience to see Bond get his revenge. Speaking of revenge, it does throw me off that Bond of all people keeps preaching the evils of revenge and killing to Melina.
Before setting out on revenge, you first dig 2 graves.
And the rock climb towards the end of the movie is an excellent sneak-in espionage final battle. Where a lot of the other final battles were big and explosive, I admire that this one is more focused on stealth and suspense than it is on action and spectacle. Don't let this movie be for my eyes only, let it be for your eyes as well.
Well, at least I liked it.
7. Skyfall. To this date, the highest grossing James Bond movie, and a celebration of the 50th anniversary of Bond. If Casino Royale was the Batman Begins of the Bond universe, this is the Dark Knight, making No Time to Die the Dark Knight Rises. And I think this was almost the Spider-Man No Way Home of the Bond universe. In early versions of the script, the Skyfall Manor was going to be full of cameos from Sean Connery, Timothy Dalton, Pierce Brosnan, and the rest of the James Bond crew. And once I learned that, I couldn't help but think how cool that would have been. Admittedly, the Home Alone sequence in the Skyfall Manor is one of the weaker elements of the script. And since they were going to throw out continuity in the next movie, might as well have a great moment with Pierce Brosnan and Judi Dench once again. It was a shame because Sean Connery was the only sticking point. I guess he really wanted his final acting role to be...
Pleased to meet you. And indeed, welcome to Cataness.
That. But yes, continuing in the tradition in The World Is Not Enough, we once again have MI6 itself being attacked, and a villain specifically targeting M. And similar to The World Is Not Enough, we're dealing with a more vulnerable James Bond who's missed a step or two. He's been out of retirement for too long, he's too old. Skyfall has some unique and beautifully choreographed action sequences. This one marks the introduction of Moneypenny, Q, and a whole new array of Daniel Craig's Bond family. We have Judi Dench as M playing a much larger role this time around, and Javier Bardem does a great job as the disgraced and unhinged former MI6 agent. Similar to Dr. No, he doesn't appear until late into the film, but you're feeling his presence throughout. And once he comes in, he steals the show. Although we may have missed out on all the fan service that Skyfall could have been, what we got was a really great film. 6. The Living Daylights. with 3 00 agents going on a training mission and one of them being killed for real. It is then when the new James Bond actor is revealed. Similar to Skyfall, this one likewise involves a file that has a list of all the secret agents and their secret identities. You know, the knock list from Mission Impossible. But this one came out first. We have John Rhys Davies, who is a great addition to any film franchise he happens to be in. We have Dr. Charles Nichols, who, call me crazy, but I think he may be trying to betray someone here. And we have Jack Wade's evil twin brother. The fight scene between James Bond and Brad Whitaker is the most video game fight scene that James Bond has had in any of these. And I'm gonna say something big here. This has one of the top 10 best action sequences of all time. Happens towards the end as Bond is flying a plane full of opium and a bomb's on board. Once again, that self-destruct sequence, love it.
5 minutes. 5 minutes is all that I need.
Bond has the celloist fly the plane, and how often do we have in a movie some people like, well, I don't know how to fly the plane, but they fly it just fine. In this one, she really does not know how to fly the plane, and it becomes an important plot point. And so Bond has to go back and deactivate the bomb. But the main henchman that Bond has to fight, the same henchman that's taken out 3 of the other 00 agents. And to top things off, they're hanging from the net of the plane, about to fall off. I gotta compliment the stunt work on it. So let's just count the number of ways Bond could die here. He could fall out of the plane. He could be killed by the henchman. The bomb could blow up. Or the lady flying the plane could crash. What can I say? I love me the living daylights. 5. On Her Majesty's Secret Service. This is my go-to example of a movie that has a lot of flaws and a lot of dumb things in it. The things it does well, it does so well that it makes up for the bad. This has my favorite Bond girl. With a James Bond that had 0 acting experience, producers knew they had to get a more experienced actress to work opposite of George Lazenby, and they got Diana Rigg.
I rigged it.
We have a James Bond that is mostly gadget-free on this one, having to rely on his wits to get out of situations, including tearing the pockets out of his pants to use his gloves to shimmy across a gondola. Blofeld's initial scheme of brainwashing girls is admittedly silly, but when it boils down to the finale and it's about Bond just rescuing his girl, there has never been a more personal battle for Bond than this one here. This is the first time that James Bond had to go rogue, where M had to tell him, "You're off the case."
You're off your case, Chief.
And that final assault on Blofeld's base, Bond does a penguin slide and machine guns people. We have a chase scene on a bobsled run. I always thought it was an interesting choice. In the bobsled run, Blofeld is throwing grenades back at Bond, and there's one grenade that drops. Oh no, will Blofeld blow himself up? We have Telly Savalas this time playing Ernst Blofeld.
My name is Argentina, and I'm going to kill you.
And he's a more physically imposing threat to James Bond. I also love me a Christmas movie, and yes, like Die Hard, this is a Christmas movie. I absolutely love this ending. It's one of my favorite endings of all time. So although there's a lot of things towards the middle and beginning that don't quite work, the movie absolutely saves it with the ending. 4. From Russia with Love. Yes, I'm a huge fan of Alfred Hitchcock, and this Bond film is the closest we have to an Alfred Hitchcock film. We have Spectre, and we have the introduction to Blofeld as the unseen mastermind petting the cat. We have a simple goal, escalate tensions between Russia and Britain over a MacGuffin, this time around the Lecter decoder. Tatiana was the first Bond girl to really set herself up as the equal but opposite to James Bond. Speaking of Bond's opposite, we have Robert Shaw as Donald Red Grant. He's a great opponent for Bond, both mentally and physically, and the fight they have on the train is some great stuff. Like the Hitchcock movies of the time, this movie does a great job in weaponizing suspense. Feels less like an action movie and more like a spy thriller. Not saying that there isn't action to be had. On land, on boats, on trains, on helicopters, we have a great variety of action once again. Dr. No may have been the first Bond film, but From Russia with Love is what built upon the success and really gave us the James Bond that we know and love today. 3. License to Kill. If I'm going purely off of action, this is James Bond's best action movie, but it does a great balance of action and suspense. Bond spends a lot of the movie undercover, working right next to Franz Sanchez, and we have the very things that trailers love to talk about.
This time, it's personal.
Appropriately titled License to Kill, Franz Sanchez has a lot of henchmen in his organization, and Bond goes through and kills each and every one of them, and none of them are let off easy. They all get painful deaths. Bond is able to manipulate Franz Sanchez and destroy his organization from the inside in a way that just killing him wouldn't be enough. None are as gritty or as visceral as the action scenes in License to Kill. Bond gets bloody, he gets bruised, he gets run through the ringer on this one. We have some cool lines from James Bond, and even some cool lines lines from Franz Sanchez. License to Kill really capitalizes on Timothy Dalton's strengths as a Bond actor. There's a seriousness, there's a dark edge to this Bond, which makes him feel like he is just one bad day away from being like Franz Sanchez. Here he is let off the leash, and we can see that we're all lucky that James Bond works for MI6. License to Kill. It's a bloody good time. 2. GoldenEye, the first James Bond movie I ever saw, and side note, the first DVD I ever watched. My first exposure to James Bond was actually through the video game, so I will admit a certain amount of nostalgia bias. Like most great movies, at the center of it is the characters, and this one has a wide array of fun and interesting characters. Tasha, 006, Onatopp, Boris, Colonel Oramov, Valentine, Jack Wade, and the introduction of Judi Dench as M. This is a superb ensemble cast with character actors given just the right amount of time to shine, and this one has perfect pacing for an action film. We got bungee jumping, motorcycle, airplane, fast cars, boat, helicopter, train, and a tank.
They got a tank.
And this is the one where James Bond has his highest body count. He definitely utilizes his License to Kill. There's a reason why Pierce Brosnan is the best James Bond for first-person shooter video games. Pierce Brosnan stepped into the role of James Bond and knocked it out of the park in his first film. The opening scene does a great job with both action spectacle and Hitchcockian-like suspense. From explosive opening to satisfying finale, GoldenEye is a spectacular film from beginning to end. 1. Casino Royale. After Die Another Day, the Bond franchise stood at a crossroad. Die Another Day may have been panned by critics, but it was a box office juggernaut. Do they go forward with a tried and tested formula that is proven to work and become basically the Fast and Furious franchise, or do they pave a new road? And they looked forward and wisely decided to dial things back and give us a more grounded and character-driven James Bond story. You may have noticed that my top 2 Bond films both have the same director, Martin Campbell, the guy that gave us Mask of Zorro, also gave us the 2 best Bond movies. This one goes a different direction in many ways, including what they do with the villain. Le Chiffre isn't trying to take over the world or get revenge or anything like this. He's just trying to make money to pay back a debt that he has. A debt that he has because James Bond foiled his previous plan. Le Chiffre is over a barrel. He's desperate. This is something that he has to do. Despite that desperation, Le Chiffre does a good job of maintaining his poker face. I'm always a big fan when the hero and villain are able to share a lot of screen time together. Given the setup of this film, Bond and Le Chiffre end up sharing a lot of screen time opposite each other. It's a problem that James Bond can't just shoot his way out of, and given that this is a young and unexperienced Bond, it's something that he has to come to terms with. This has the best Bond chase scene, and it is just one that's on foot. It's an action scene that teaches us about the characters. Whereas the bomb maker will try to find a way around a thing, Bond will just smash through it. At this point, he is a blunt instrument. Ultimately, what separates this Bond movie from the others is the character progression of James Bond himself. In this film, James Bond physically is as strong as he's ever been, but mentally and emotionally he still has a lot to learn about being the spy he needs to be.
And how the hell could Bond be so stupid?
He makes some cocky mistakes, and he learns and grows and progresses as a character through the story. It's no coincidence that it's not until the end that Bond is able to step in and say his iconic line. When the movie does action, it is some of the best action there is. When the movie does suspense, it is absolute white-knuckle, edge-of-your-seat type suspense. The way the mystery unfolds one step at a time makes it engaging for the audience. Casino Royale may have taken them 3 tries, but was definitely worth it with what we got. And it is my absolute favorite James Bond film.
So that's my list of the best James Bond films. But I'm curious, what do you all think? What is the best and worst James Bond film? Which one did I get completely wrong? Or, on the other side, what one do you completely agree with? Of all the film franchises, it seems like the Bond franchise has the greatest fluctuation of opinions on which one's the best, which one's the worst. And so I'm genuinely curious, what do you all think?